minds of the nonsense that causes us to suffer, which causes us to harm others, so that we can develop our amazing potential of Buddhahood for our sake and the sake of others. This is why we're here together. Think like this. And we can express these ideas in our little refuge and bodhicitta prayer. Sangye chodam soke chodam la jancho padu dagi kyatsuchi dagi chodyen gipe sonam ki droda penchir sangye drupasho sangye chodam soke chodam la jancho padu dagi kyatsuchi dagi chodyen gipe sonam ki droda penchir sangye drupasho Sangye charam soke chognam la jancho baru dagni kyap suchi dagi chanyen gipa sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupasho. And then for auspiciousness, let's make a mandala offering, which just means thinking of all the marvelous things of this universe, that beings that make them happy. Of course, if we know the contents of the universe according to Buddhist cosmology, then fine, we think that. If not, then we just think of the things that we know, pile them all up, and make an offering to the Buddha as if he were here himself, as a request for the teachings. Sajipa ki jukshin metok chamri rablingji nide gen padi sangye jing dumik te urwagi Trokunam Dajinga Chapasho. And then we imagine Buddha very happy, accepting our offering, receiving it. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Atayami. So just for the auspiciousness, the imprints of these Lord Buddha's words in our mind we recite. But just first of all, let's imagine our being there. So this is at Rajgir. So if anybody's been there, you know, you've walked up that hill to Vulture Peak, this little tiny spot, where Buddha gave many of his teachings. Very special place. So we imagine they're there with the Buddha. So first of all, what you know it says in here, with a great host of monks. He's sitting there with a great host of monks and a great host of bodhisattvas. So if you've been there, you know it's really tiny. You know, 20 people fit. And it says a great host of monks and bodhisattvas. So I asked our Lama in San Francisco, where do they all sit? He said, oh, in the sky. What do you think? So we visualize all the holy beings in the sky. Okay, we're sitting there. If you can sit in the sky, great. And there's Buddha, and this is interesting because Buddha gave teachings various different ways. And one of them, apparently, was like this one, where he sits there in meditation, and then he kind of channels his information into the minds of his disciples. So in this case, it's Shariputra, who apparently was really good with emptiness, and then Avalokitesvara, but not as a deity, but in the 10th level bodhisattva form, human form. And they're having this conversation. And basically it's Buddha's teachings, though. He's sitting there in meditation, they're saying the words. But it is called the Buddha's teaching, which is curious, isn't it? So we visualize that, and we're there, and we say these words. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on mass of Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. Page 5. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokitesvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokitesvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokitesvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of a lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Ta ta om gate gate para gate para samgate bodhi swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Dhammas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Okay, so what does all that mean? Let's have a look. Well, first of all, here's some context. Emptiness, as we know, we've studied a little bit the packaging of the Buddha's teachings according to the Tibetan approach. They call it the Lam Rim. You know, it's this packaging of Buddha's teachings. First it started with, Lama Atisha back in the 11th century when he got to Tibet, wrote this text called Light for the Path, the light that guides you on the path. And what he basically did was take the essential points of Lord Buddha's teachings and present them in a nice, orderly way. And this is something really important to first get. But first, even before we do that, let's just remind ourselves about the Buddha and therefore the way to listen to Buddha's teachings. You know, maybe most of us have come from a Christian background, I don't know, unless your parents were communists or something, I'm not sure. But, you know, but let's say mostly, if we've been religious, we've probably been in a creator religion, haven't we? And we all know that seems to be the default mode, very deep in the bones of most people, that a religion equals a creator. So that means that view is this dualistic view of somebody being the boss, isn't it? God's the boss, God made the universe, God made me, and then God made the laws of morality, and then God is to be obeyed. So even, you know, we'll go into this later, but I remember always asking a Jesuit priest friend of mine, what is a sin by definition? And he said it's that which goes against the will of God. So by definition, being naughty means you did what God said you shouldn't do. So this is the dualistic view, actually, the Buddha's arguing with, but it's the view that the Buddhism doesn't have. So God is the boss, and therefore God, so therefore you should believe in God. It will be considered very arrogant if you go off and start checking whether God was right or wrong, isn't it? One doesn't do that. But that's the approach of Buddhism. And why, very simply, we know he doesn't posit a creator. But why not? Because he has his own view from his own observation that consciousnesses don't need creating because they're beginningless, you know, and that everything a sentient being does creates the person themselves, which is the view of karma, which we'll certainly talk about. So therefore the approach, and the fact that Buddha was a regular guy who became an enlightened being. So therefore everything that is Buddhism is not revelation, didn't come from a holy being in the sky. He didn't make it up, that would be considered very rude. He's observed it. It's actually, he's like a scientist, literally the equivalent of a scientist. You know, if I were Einstein telling you about relativity, you know it wasn't revealed to me in a dream. You know I might ask you to believe it. You know I didn't make it up. You know I'm not asking you to have faith in it. It's my own direct experience, is it not? So you know you can take it or leave it. And if you want to discover whether I'm right or wrong, then you have to investigate the same steps. Do what, you know, I laid out my methodology and you go through those same steps. And I'm either right or wrong, and you'll find out. That's the approach to the Buddha. So that means we listen with our intelligent hat on, not with our blind faith hat. You know, the Buddha, that's intellectual laziness. Because Buddha might well be wrong. We are the boss, not Buddha. We have to find out. So the way to listen is just out of interest, you know, listening. Now, if we have confidence in Buddhism, we're taking refuge, and we listen to it as if we haven't heard it before, listen to it freshly every time, not just going, oh yeah, I know that, yeah, that's right, yeah, Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. But every time you hear it, wanting to get it a little bit deeper, wanting to hear it a little bit more deeply, wanting, in other words, wanting to verify it as true, and wanting to experience it for ourselves. That's the way to engage in it. That is very rich every time. You know, if you have that view, you never get bored with it. You say the same thing every time, and every time you say it or hear it, it goes a little bit deeper every time. So we listen with our intelligent hats on, and that's the way to think. I want to say that first. It's important to remember this, you know. Okay. So, according to, you know, if we look at the packaging of the teachings according to the Lam Ring, which is a really helpful way of, as I said, packaging all of Buddha's teachings in a nice, orderly way. So this word Lam Ring, you know, sometimes you get a little bit confused. We know in English it's gradual path, something like that. Well, that's a medieval phrase that we, much better, would translate in modern day English as simply a course. We get that, you know. Oh, a course. Oh, okay. We know with a course you begin at grade 1, you go to grade 2, and then you graduate at the end. Well, it's a gradual path. Very reasonable. But we don't think of the Lam Ring as a course, because we don't think of spiritual teachings as something that you can enter into a course. But that's exactly what it is. So according to that packaging, a course, the teachings on emptiness are actually part of the of high school. You know, lower scope, middle scope, grade scope. You know, you've got two wings of the bird. You've got all the Hinayana teachings, which is junior school and high school, the first two scopes. And then you have the university, I like to call it this, because they're the way we can comprehend gradual. And then you have the postgraduate, of course, which is the Vajrayana. But emptiness itself is a Hinayana teaching. Because it has to be. Because the Hinayana practitioners who accomplish their own liberation, they accomplish it on the basis of realizing emptiness. So it has to be a Hinayana teaching. But you graduated high school if you did just that. You achieved your own liberation, your own nirvana. But as we know, we then have the compassion wing, the bodhisattva wing, the compassion component, the bodhisattva component. So here, emptiness is taught, if you look at the Lam Ring, it's taught in the context of the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. It's taught in the context of the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. And in fact, it's the 6th of the 6. The 5th is the teaching on calm abiding, the meditation technique that is necessary in order to accomplish wisdom. You know? So now the meditation technique is also a Hinayana teaching. And not only that, it's actually a Hindu teaching. The Hindus cultivated this astonishingly sophisticated psychological technique that enables one to go to the subtlest levels of what, not the subtlest there, one is Vajrayana for that, they would say, but extremely subtle, more refined levels of consciousness that in our materialist world are not even posited as existing. It was the Hindus. I'm reading the Dalai Lama recently, and he said it was the Hindus more than 3,000 years ago who began this astonishing, marvelous discussion of the nature of self. In other words, they're your most amazing psychologists. Well, Buddha came exactly out of this, and he brought much of what he got from the Hindus. You know, the model of the mind that's still taught in Buddhism came out of the Hindus' investigations. This technique called concentration meditation, samadhi, you know, they call it, calm abiding, samatha. This is not even a Buddhist teaching. It's a Hindu teaching. These amazing beings way back, you know. And Buddha, as we know, came out of this and then diverged in his own direction. And the level at which he diverged, the points on which he diverged in many points, but the key one, as we all know, is his interpretation of exactly what is the self and what isn't. In other words, his teachings about emptiness. Blissful wisdom. So here it's taught as the perfection of wisdom, the sixth of the six perfections of the Bodhisattva. So the crucial difference here then, in the approach to emptiness, is where it's combined with bodhicitta. That's the difference. That's where it has infinitely more power, it is said, when it's combined with compassion, combined with bodhicitta. The bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. So that's the context here. Okay, so one way of describing Buddha's worldview, there are many ways into it. You can describe it as a path of morality. You can describe it as a path of psychology. There's no question about that. That's Buddha's expertise. The mind is Buddha's expertise. There is no doubt. This is utterly central for him to everything. It's a philosophical view of the universe. It's an entire worldview that describes exactly the universe. Don't doubt it. And one approach, which is the approach we're taking here, is in relation to the mind, but in particular, very specifically, in relation to Buddha's approach to why we suffer. It's about in relation to suffering and happiness. He says if you look at all sentient beings, not just humans, we're like 1/1000% of all sentient beings. The term in Tibetan is very nice. Sem-chen, mind possessor. There are trillions of mind possessors for the Buddha. Some are human. We know there's a vast number called the animals, all the creatures and slugs and worms and the fish and the giraffes and the dogs and the birds, all these beings, billions and trillions of them. They're all mind possessors, they're sentient beings. Then we have all the ones we can't see, that we know Buddha posits. The beings of the God realms, the equivalent to the paradise and heaven of the Christians and Muslims. Then the beings of the hell realms. The Muslims and Christians agree, all these observations of many great beings over the centuries, it seems to me they've all observed the similar things, but they've got different interpretations of what causes it, etc., etc. And then you have the spirits, these intensely suffering beings, These are all states of mind for the Buddha, all coming along with their own level of physicality. So for the Buddha, every one of these sentient beings, what drives every one spontaneously is the wish to be happy and the wish not to suffer. The wish to be happy and the wish not to suffer. So we can frame the whole of Buddhism in this context, through this, in this way. So what Buddhism is, and from this point of view, are methods to quit suffering and get happy. To quit suffering and get happy. So Buddha's take on this, Buddha's own direct findings from his own direct experience, is that if it's true, is that we can be free of suffering utterly, and we can be full of happiness totally. The word Sangye, the Tibetan word for the word Buddha, the first syllable, Sang, implies the complete eradication from one's mind of all the suffering and its causes. And then the second syllable, Ge, implies the complete development of all the perfections, all the goodness, all the virtues, all the positive qualities. This is Buddha's finding. This is Buddha's unique finding. And all the ways of presenting Buddhism are presentations of that. So this particularly is the way Buddha presents. Because if it's true, if we take the Four Noble Truths, one of his marvellous packagings of the teachings, the Four Noble Truths, the third one is Buddha's discovery, his findings through his own direct experience, that there is the possibility of for every single sentient being to be free of suffering, cessation of suffering, and its causes. So clearly, if that's a possibility, and it's very encouraging to hear it, we better know what suffering is, first noble truth, and crucially, what are the causes, second noble truth, because that implies the fourth one, the methods to do it. So for the Buddha, as we know in the second noble truth, there are two main causes of suffering, and they both subsume down to one: delusions, neuroses, negative states of mind, neurotic states of mind, non-virtuous states of mind, disturbing emotions, afflictive emotions, mental afflictions. All of these terms are, broadly speaking, synonymous. And these, for the Buddha, that's his findings. These are the problem. So that's why we must learn to know our minds. This is absolutely central to Buddhism. This is his thing. Everything comes from the mind, and it's not a cliche. for the Buddha. It's an absolute, it's a definite truth. So, Buddhists, and again, this has come from the Hindus' investigations by these amazing great meditators, how the mind functions. You know, there's different ways of talking about the mind. We have sensory consciousness, for example, and we have mental consciousness. So sensory is already even looking at how the sensory consciousness works from Buddha's point of view. This is getting us to the Heart Sutra, where he describes these things. We're getting to this. I'm bringing it to where this has got related to what we're discussing. So he says the problems are in the mind. So sensory consciousness, for example, you know, where's my cup? Here's my cup. Let's say. So I might go to you. I might say, oh, there's a pretty cup, right? So, you know, within a millisecond, isn't it? My eye consciousness lands on here, and then I go, oh, what a pretty cup. So naturally we assume, don't we, that my eye consciousness sees a pretty cup. Well, you're wrong. It doesn't. What happens is this. When we understand this, we're really getting we're getting into sync with Buddha's way of seeing the entire world, which is that our minds make mistakes. That we are cognizing phenomena that don't exist. We make things up. And what the Heart Sutra is all about is how we have to, you know, we have to counteract that. We have to see things how they exist. This is what he's talking about. So, for example, we can see senses. The way Buddhism talks is very simple. Eye consciousness actually is really limited in its capacity for cognition. Mind has the function to cognize, or to be aware, or to know. These three are synonymous. That's the job of the mind. The mind cognizes, is aware, or knows. They're synonymous. That's its job. So then clearly the question is, well, cognizes what? Well, guess what? That which exists. That which exists. This is a huge point for the Buddha. That's the job of the mind. So right now, Buddha's saying that our consciousnesses are riddled with neuroses, delusions, not the sensory, but the mental consciousness, that are liars, delusions, mental afflictions, misconceptions, neuroses, that cause things to appear as they don't exist. We don't realize this because we've been doing it for eons, Buddha says. So our job as Buddhists then is to know the mind, to understand the mind, how it functions, to recognize the way the mind functions, to recognize the delusions, how they are liars, which leads us to see the ultimate way in which things exist, and to counteract the root delusion, which we'll go into. So let's even look at the way the senses and sensory and mental are so different, and the way Buddha will talk about the sensory. It already points to how we make nonsense up. So, you know, eye consciousness, all it can cognize, it's got two objects. Eye consciousness can only cognize two things: shape and colour. That's it. It's like a dumb animal. It doesn't know any more. It's not possible for it to cognize any more than that. But look what happens. This is so fascinating. Because we're familiar with a cup, we don't have to look up in Wikipedia and work out the shape. Oh yeah, that's called a cup. That's right. No, we've got it down. We know it, don't we? We're really familiar with cups because we haven't lost our memory yet, right? Isn't it? So what happens is, and I'm not kidding, the eye consciousness goes onto this, and then, not kidding, it's literally true, quicker than Google, it will access the mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is, as long as Robina says. That's where all the information is stored, all our memories, all the billions of things we've seen and heard and touched and smelled. We've stored it all away. We're familiar with it, all the stuff we've learned, all the music, all the computers, all the good stuff, all the bad stuff, all the lying, all the killing, all the whatever it might be, stored, not just from this life, but from eons of life, Buddha said. We're carrying like billions of bank vaults or billions of computer programs of information stored in our mental consciousness. And we're not talking about our brains. So, what happens is we know, instantly, our eye consciousness jumps onto this, straight away, quicker than Google, accesses what's in my mental consciousness, accesses. So instantly what comes up is cup. What comes up is as a result of all the tastes that I've developed over the years and what I think is beautiful and not beautiful, my recognition of blue, my recognition of this and that, and boom, out comes the statement, what a pretty cup. So basically, shape and colour is all there has been cognized. The rest of it is a story made up by my mental consciousness. And this is what Buddha is saying. We're all doing, all the time. But we don't think we're doing this, because we think there is a cup out there that is pretty. We don't think we're doing these projections. We don't think this, because it's eons of habits, Buddha says. And this is what we're going to try and unpack here, in Buddha's way of understanding how the mind cognizes and how the mind makes mistakes, and therefore how we can get enlightened, how we can rid the mind of the mistakes. Ear consciousness, same. The second I hear that one note, I'm going to go, wow, Miles Davis. I just hear the one note of trumpet. I instantly put it in place and time. I know it's Miles Davis. I know it's trumpet. I can probably even tell you the well, I can't know all these songs, no, because I'm familiar with it. And straight away, But it's a story my mind has made up. The sound, that's all sound, mere sound. So the interesting point is that we look into the mental consciousness, which is where the workshop is, as Ramazoka puts in. There are, in fact, there are views in there, because the mind is made up of viewpoints. All of these are viewpoints. What a pretty cup, it's a viewpoint. You are a nice person, it's a viewpoint. He is ugly, it's a viewpoint. I am happy, it's a viewpoint. There's a table, that's a viewpoint. This is very fascinating. It's coming from the mind. But what Buddha is basically saying is, within the mind, you've got three categories of states of mind. Those that are virtuous or positive. And these are not moralistic terms, these are technical terms. Those that are negative or neurotic, and those that are neutral, neither. And that doesn't mean they're not important. There's thousands of states of mind, actually, floating around in our consciousness. Many, many of them are absolutely necessary to be functioning as a proper person. Whether you're a good person or a bad person, they're all functioning, but they don't have a characteristic of being either virtuous or non-virtuous. They've got really specific characteristics which we're going to talk about, which we absolutely have to identify if we want to be Buddhist, using Buddha's view accurately, if we want to get to realize emptiness. So the neutral ones, for example, there's thousands of them. I like to call them the plumbing of your mind. They cause you to function properly. So, there's a state of mind called discrimination. They call it, it's translated often. And it's happening all the time, every second. And it's simply like an intelligence, like an ability to distinguish between blue and white, up and down, good and indeed, when it comes to practice, good and bad. It's a type of intelligence. But, it's not in its nature virtuous or non-virtuous. Now, another one, surprisingly, called mindfulness, which we practically think is a special religion these days, with a capital M. Not being rude. But it's simply a bare bones part of the mind that's really necessary in order to do anything properly. It's not religious in its nature at all. As Ramazoka says, thieves need mindfulness. Mindfulness, we've really got a misconception about what it means. It's used in a different way these days. But according to the Buddhist model of the mind, it's one of these bare bones, neutral states that is the capacity to not forget what you're doing from moment to moment. That's all. From moment to moment. It's like short-term memory. So you say, I'm going to do a short-term memory retreat. Doesn't sound quite so fancy, does it? It's basically the ability to not forget what you're doing moment by moment. So if I get up, sit up, get up here, and I'm about, we do this. You go to the fridge and you go, oh, what was I getting out of the fridge? You have that all the time, don't we? That's mindfulness gone. In other words, the opposite of mindfulness is forgetfulness. You forget what you're doing. It's a really simple state of mind. Well, it's a neutral state of mind. It's neither good nor bad. Thieves need it, murderers need it, snipers need it. Of course, it's taught in the context of developing it's taught in the context of developing concentration so that we can go to deeper levels of our mind, so then we can begin to unravel and unpack the craziness so we can begin to develop concentration and become a virtuous person. That's the context in which mindfulness is taught. But strictly speaking, it's one of these neutral states of mind. So there's many, many of these. Now the virtues and the non-virtues, or the negative and positive, these terms actually are used in slightly different contexts, but broadly speaking here, we're using these synonymously, okay? So the negative and the positive. These are the ones we really need to learn to understand. This is the essence of Buddhist psychology. And it's quite distinct. The words positive, negative, we all know. And we listen to examples of these. We know them backwards and upside down, and everybody in every culture knows them. They're fundamental to human beings, or other creatures too. So, for example, an example of a negative state of mind is called anger. We all know that. Jealousy, depression. We call these emotions, Because this is the stuff of Buddhist psychology. attachment. Then you've got virtuous states of mind, positive. We know them as well. Love, compassion, forgiveness, goodness. This is fundamental to all beings. We can see it. And this is the stuff of Buddhist psychology. You know? So the way Buddhism describes these states of mind, first, they're not a function of the brain. This is such a shock to us, you know. They're not given to you by your parents. They're tendencies in our own consciousness itself. And all Buddha is saying is fundamental. The negative states of mind are the cause of all suffering, period. And the virtuous states of mind are the cause of happiness. So logically, if you want to get rid of suffering, you have to identify your states of mind and get rid of them. And if you want happiness, you've got to grow them. It's sort of so simple as a concept, it's embarrassing, actually. But the doing of it is the hard part, because we're addicted to the bad stuff, and it's a struggle to get addicted to the good stuff. That's the job, basically. Practice makes perfect, you know. So what's fascinating about the negative states of mind, the ones that we know so well, they've got two main characteristics. One we know immediately, and this is indicated by one of the many synonyms, not a disturbing emotion. Check the last time you were jealous. It's like unbearable, isn't it? Angry. We might think we're allowed to be angry, but look at the disturbing nature of it. Freaking out, you know. Low self-esteem, arrogance, jealousy, pride, all these terms, we know them so well. These are the ones that are called negative, and they've got the particular characteristic of being deeply disturbing. To you, the having of them, right there. And the other characteristic, this is the key. If we can get this one, we are on track in understanding how Buddha talks, and we can begin to understand emptiness quite easily when we get this one. And that is indicated by this other synonym, but certainly in English. I see in other languages there are very strange translations of it, which kind of cause us not to really get the meaning, but the English word is perfect. Delusion. Delusion. It's very specific. If you are considered delusional, you are being accused of not being in touch with reality, aren't you? That's exactly, I mean, like, absolutely spot on. That is exactly what Buddha is saying. When we can begin to understand that, when we look at attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, the disturbing part we can all get. But the delusional one is not a way we think. We don't look at it like this, but this is Buddha's unique approach. When we can get that, then we can get to the root delusion. Because there's a hierarchy of these delusions in Buddhist psychology. We need to understand them. There's like a hierarchy. The root delusion is simply called, as we know, ignorance. Very specifically defined. And I'll describe it. And it's known colloquially as ego grasping, very tasty, or self-grasping. Or in Tibetan it's mat-ripa, unawareness. They call it the root delusion, like the one that's the basis of all the others. It's the one that informs all the other stuff that we experience day to day. The attachment, the jealousy, the neuroses, the misery, the depression, you know, which cause us then in turn with our body and speech to harm others. This is the source of all samsara, Buddha says. But to get this, to really understand how these neuroses, these disturbing emotions, have this very specific characteristic of being lies in the mind. Meaning, the extent to which any one of them is prevalent is the extent to which what you're cognizing doesn't appear accurately to you. That's exactly what it's meaning. Now this is utterly how ignorance functions. But all the others are informed by that ignorance. And they've all got their own job, you know. So, as far as Buddha is concerned, and again the Four Noble Truths, effectively the main cause of suffering in day-to-day life is called attachment. This simple, cute word, you know. It's synonymous with desire, uses craving, these different words. And this word seems so simple. But Lama Yeshe's saying, I could tell you about it for one whole year. You'll never begin to really understand it until you start looking deeply inside. And start looking to be your own therapist. Lama Yeshe would say that. Not kidding. This is when you really become a Buddhist, when you start to investigate your mind, using, of course, Buddha's model of the mind, based on good concentration. That's where the real job, that's where you become a Buddhist. This is what we're talking about high school here, not basic level, which we'll talk about. Okay, so attachment is the main voice of the ego grasping, of the root delusion. Effectively, in day-to-day life, it's the main source of our suffering. insofar as we are living, as we know from Buddha's teaching, in a desire realm, in a realm of attachment. Look at us, in these bodies. This body is the product of attachment. This body has 5 senses. We know, like we're 5 holes that demand feeding. That's what the senses are, isn't it? And what is this world that we occupy? It's the objects of these 5 senses. So we spend our lives trying to ingest the 5 senses, the 5 sense objects, isn't it? Do you see my point? This is the desire realm. It's what we live in. And it's driven by attachment. Attachment's the mind, the motor that propels that activity. So attachment, you could say, has got multi-facets, you know? It starts with born in the second we're conceived in our parents, in our mummy's womb. The main energy we've already got is, and we pop out the mother's womb, we've got this huge, this is the energy level, almost the energetic level of attachment from the practice of it in past lives. We're born with this deep, depending on the person, deep sense of dissatisfaction. That's its main energy, dissatisfaction. So it seems almost not obvious to us. When you think of attachment, you don't think of dissatisfaction. But when you look at it like a baby even that comes out, always crying, always disturbed, always distressed, that's called dissatisfaction. That's called attachment energy. In other words, when we start to become more conscious of it as we get older, it's articulated for us as a sense that I don't have enough. And it means I am not enough. No matter what I get, it's never enough. No matter what I achieve, it's never enough. I never get enough, have enough, do enough. It's terrible, terrible. It's a mental illness, this dissatisfaction. That's the energy of attachment. So obviously if you're dissatisfied, then obviously you want more. And the first level of the way this attachment functions is obviously for the objects of your senses. And we all can see, we've all got variations. Some people like bodies and become attached to sex. Some become attached to eating, attached to money, attached to possessions, attached to the body, so you never eat, you know, attached to whatever it is in the outside world, through the senses. But we've got subtler attachment, of course, which we'll talk about later. But the obvious level is the senses, the objects of the senses. So the assumption, so attachment, Buddha's saying, is a deeply disturbing emotion, like all the others, and is a liar. So that's the thing to get. How is it a liar? How is it deceptive? How is it a delusion? Literally, it's a mistaken story the mind makes up about the thing, the person, the event, the taste, the smell, or whatever it might be. And this is the primordial one that propels us through every second of our life. So we'll discuss that in a second, how it's delusional. But then another level of attachment, another way of describing its function, is then once this sense of dissatisfaction, so looking for something to fill me up, to fill up the gaping hole, isn't it? The food, whatever. And then when the eye consciousness sees that brown triangle, instantaneously recognize it as chocolate cake, and all the other stories come rushing in. And so one of the things we know that happens is that that brown triangle, that chocolate cake, will look way more delicious than it actually is. Now this is an experience we have every single day, but we never join the dots. We never get the lesson from it. When you're hungry, when attachment is there, and there's the dissatisfaction, then you think, oh, what do I have? Then you think cake. Then you look at it and you see it, and you nearly faint with this pleasure, this anticipation, isn't it, of the senses meeting the object. It looks unbelievably delicious. So in a millionth of a second, this dramatic, huge story is already being written from habit. That it is incredibly delicious. That when I get it, I'll get happy. So you put the first mouthful in, and then there's this next level of attachment. So there's the dissatisfaction, the thinking about what you want, the craving for it, the manipulating to get it, the getting of it, and then the anticipation of the happiness. The first mouthful goes in, it's like bliss. But isn't it, if you're chewing it, already you're stuffing in the next one. Look at the 3-year-old. One hand goes out, another hand goes out, stuffing it in this way, then someone else grabs it, they burst into tears because they wanted it. I mean, we behave a bit more better than that. Not quite the same as a 3-year-old, but it's the little mind's gone berserk. Attachment's like frantic. Frantic, isn't it? When it's a really strong object. Frantic, desperate, can't believe. And it's just utterly irrational. It's completely like a dumb animal. Isn't it? This is attachment energy. Totally feeling miserable, totally believing when I get that I'll get happy, because it looks more delicious than it really is. You totally believe it's more delicious than it really is. You totally believe attachment story that it will bring you happiness. Then you anticipate to get it, you do everything you can to get it, and then you keep waiting for happiness to come. And what happens? So not only has no happiness come, only a full stomach, really distressed, guilty, all the other business, already thinking, well, tomorrow I'll go on a diet and I won't eat 4 pieces of chocolate. So I'll lose a bit of, all the time, all this talking, trying to act normal in your conversation over the dinner table, completely freaking out inside. You haven't got happiness. And now, look how the cake looks. It hasn't even got cold yet, but it now looks disgusting, doesn't it? Because why? Because attachment has now turned into aversion. And we spend our lives going between these two, attachment and aversion. Because aversion is the response of attachment doesn't get what it wants. And it didn't get the happiness, because you can't. Cake is not the cause of happiness. Cake is not the cause of happiness. It's very simple, Buddha says. But we are addicted to thinking it is. So we never learn our lesson. Buddha said we've been bashing our heads against brick walls for eons. We keep thinking the next time I'll do it. Oh, tomorrow, cake again. Oh, wow, great. Try again, Didn't work yesterday, it might work today. Same one. We know this. We know that. And you look at all our experiences, the new job, the handsome boyfriend, the lovely this, the nice that, the something this. The trouble is, though, this attachment doesn't come in its raw form. It comes with us mixed with virtue and kindness and goodness and compassion. So it's much harder to identify it. Because it just seems like normal life. So Buddha's key way of talking is we have to learn to distinguish through being our own therapist, this absolute distinction between the poisonous states of mind, which in their nature, if you had them in a raw form, you'd be like a monster. Some people have mostly attachment to nothing else, we can see. That's when they're monstrous. But our attachment's tempered by our kindness and generosity, so it's much harder to see how it's just totally poisonous states of mind. And this is unique to the Buddha. In our world, in our psychological models, we know there's no view that remotely, says that attachment in its nature, anger in its nature, jealousy in its nature are negative, are the cause of all your suffering, and even more outrageous that you can get rid of them. No, we give equal status to all these states of mind in our models of the mind, in our world, and then we just hope that you have reasonable love and reasonable kindness and lessen your anger a little bit, you'll be a good human being. That's about the best we can expect, Well, Buddha's a billion times more radical. So when these words are so common to us, we need to know what Buddha's meaning is. It's very different. And we just tend to gloss over these sometimes, And then we think we're serious psychologists, and we learn all about bipolar and ADID and DD, this, that, and blah, blah, blah. And all these massive volumes of, the psychiatry volumes, every day coming up with new volumes of new illnesses. This is a model that Buddha's been talking for 2,500 years, and if it's good enough to get enlightened on, I would suggest it's good enough to understand your mind. Do you see my point? We think, oh yeah, that's just attachment and anger, but well, I'm a serious psychologist, I learned about bipolar or personality disorders, These words we use in the West. I'm not being sarcastic, they're fine models, but there's nothing wrong with Buddha's model. If it helps you get enlightened, understanding your mind in this way, I would suggest it's a pretty stable model. And he hasn't changed in 2,500 years. But other works, or they're just plain stubborn, Are we communicating here? Okay. So any questions so far? Then we'll leave all this to emptiness. Any questions so far? Points to clarify? Definitions to get clear on? Points to make? Well, I'll just keep going. Huh? Okay. All right. So, okay. Now, let's look at what Buddha's saying here, and we'll link it to what we've been talking about. Basically, he's saying here that we have to any son of lineage or daughter of lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty inherent nature. So what he's saying is this. Basically this is not really complicated. Basically what this is, this sutra, is if I know what I'm talking about. it is not complicated in the sense that you can look at it quite quickly and see what he's saying. Getting the meaning of it is another discussion. So what here is being listed is basically all the categories of phenomena according to the Buddhist worldview. That's what this is. Everything in here, in the universe, is included in these categories. Right there. So, in the world, the Buddhist model of the universe, you've got one grouping, for example, the first one that he uses is the 5 aggregates. Well, that, first of all, is one way of describing the contents of the impermanent universe, or secondly, the contents of a person. There's personal aggregates, and then there's the 5 aggregates in general. The 5 aggregates are the way of dividing the entire contents of the impermanent phenomena of the universe. But here we'll take them in terms of the person, the 5 aggregates. So Buddha has broken us down into these 5. Initially it seems a bit arbitrary, because if you want to look at a person, we could say you've got 3 aggregates, you've got 3 components. Because each thing that exists in the world is made up of parts, right? So a person is made up of mind, which is not physical. Then you've got body or form. Form refers to the physical components. Mind and then matter. And then there's a third category, which is in here. It's called compositional factors. It's like a little grab bag of leftover bits that are neither mind nor matter. So for example, karmic imprints is an example. It's not mind, it's not matter. There's lots of bits and pieces like this, So there's a whole grab bag of bits and pieces. So, but he's chosen 5 aggregates. And so the reason is, it seems, you've got form, which is your body. The next one is feeling, and then discrimination. So these are 2 of the 51, what they refer to as mental factors, what we would call states of mind, that are taught in a particular text that is studied in all the monasteries in Buddhism, in all the traditions, called, as we know in Tibetan, called Lo Rig, mind and awareness. And it's the description of the epistemological model of the mind, how the mind functions, sensory, mental, concepts, perception, which is really fascinating. If you want to understand Buddhist psychology, you need to study it. And then the second one is the psychological model, the different components, love, hate, compassion, jealousy, all these things, the states of our mind, or as they call them, the mental factors. So these 2 are chosen by the Buddha, feeling and discrimination. They're 2, this particular text has got 51. There's thousands of states of mind, but in the psychological model they pin it down to 51 states of mind that are necessary in order to develop meditation skills, in order to develop oneself in morality. So that they've selected out of the thousands just 51. So in that grouping of 51, there's a grouping called the 5 always present mental factors. So discrimination, the one I mentioned before, is one of them, and feeling is another. So these 2 are very powerful in the way attachment plays out. So therefore crucial to understand. So Buddha gave them their own status as 2 of our 5 bits and pieces that he would say we're made up of. Are we communicating here? I'm sure if we're not, you're going to ask me a question. I hope you do. And then compositional factors is that little grab bag of all the bits and pieces left over of the impermanent bits of us. And then finally, consciousness refers to what they call the mental consciousness in general, okay? Consciousness, your primary mind they talk about, the way they describe mind. So the 5 aggregates. The bigger point here is this, that basically these are different categories of phenomena the world made up of. So the 5 aggregates. Then you've got the next 18, or the next 3 lots of 6. No form, no feeling. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, the 5 senses. And then the 6th one is no mind, meaning mental consciousness. They're called the 6 senses for whatever reason, even though the 6th is the mental consciousness. Then you've got the objects of those consciousnesses. The objects of those consciousness. So here, no eye, no visual form, shape and colour, no sound, no odour, no taste, no object of touch. And then no phenomenon, meaning no objects of mental consciousness. And then you've got what they call, we don't talk about this in our culture, the 5 elements, they call these sense elements or the sense powers. It's like a subtle physical energy that's crucial in order for having a cognition of eye consciousness. You've got to have the eye sense power working, the eye consciousness, and the shape over there. The 3 come together and you have a moment of eye consciousness. So these are the 18 constituents, they call them, I think. Then you've got the 12 links. Ignorance, up to and including your 18th death, the 12 links. Buddha's describing of each of the steps that we go through to perpetuate samsara. And then there's the Four Noble Truths. And then there's about wisdom and attainment of wisdom. So basically, even emptinesses are included in here. Okay, so now, let's go back a bit. Alright, so now, what Buddha's saying is, right now, as I said, that in the mental consciousness, in the category called negative states of mind, there are these states of mind that are deeply disturbing and are delusional in their nature. They are liars. And it is these that have caused us since beginningless time to suffer, to be reborn, and will never get out of suffering until we have removed them from our mind. That's his incredible finding. That's his outrageous finding, unique to the Buddha. That these delusions are adventitious. Get your dictionary out, you're going to see. We don't use that word in our daily life, but it's a crucial word. It means they're not at the core of our being. All of Buddha's teachings are leading us to this. All of Buddha's teachings from A to Z are leading us to this realization of emptiness. So, okay, what he's saying is, then, if we have these delusions in the mind that cognize that which exists in the universe wrongly, we've got to start learning to cognize things correctly. So, but the first thing we've got to do is let's look now at one wonderful way of framing this view of this approach of the Buddha to learn to see how things exist. We frame it in the context of the two truths. And this is so helpful. This will really help us understand the Heart Sutra. Okay, so Buddha's saying that the conventional universe we live in, universes, are made up of billions and billions of individual phenomena. So he says we're cognizing them all wrongly. Remember that? We're not seeing them properly. That's why we suffer. That's why we harm others. That's why we keep being born. Gods, hells, humans, round and round samsara. So we've got to learn to cognize things properly. But first of all, before we do this, we've got to learn to establish what does exist in the first place, conventionally. So the two truths are conventional truth, ultimate truth. Conventional truth, ultimate truth. So one way of describing this is, let's say, we'll point to this thing. We'll go, what's that, Mummy? I always use this example. What's that, Mummy? And she will say, well, darling, it's a cup. And she'll say, no, she'll say, its name is a cup. And then she'll begin to describe it to me. And she'll give me the definition. And the definition has two parts. The first part, she will describe the conventional characteristics, that flat bottom container over there. And I will see that. I'll be able to recognize it with my eyes. Flat bottom container, because I know the meaning of those words. But I'm not happy yet. I don't know what it does. I don't know its job, its function. And then she will tell me, well, darling, it'll hold my tea. Now you have the actual function of that cup. But that's not enough to prove it's a cup yet. So what do I have to do? As His Holiness says, you've got to get your tea and you pour it in. And if it holds the tea, which is the definition, then it fits the definition, doesn't it? So you've proven it's a cup. Conventionally, you have to establish something that exists. So in the Buddhist philosophy, you study the universe is made up of several terms that are used to refer to that which exists. Conventionally, we're talking conventionally here. You've got various synonyms for that which exists. The word phenomenon doesn't just mean a physical thing in Buddhism. It refers to whatever exists. The word existent. The word object of knowledge. The term established base. So in order to begin to investigate how things exist, which is what Buddha's on about, we have to first establish what exists. Because if you don't know what a cup is, how can you discuss it? So let's get our terms clear. Let's get agreement what a cup is. This is conventional reality. So we've got to establish, agree upon what is that. Then we can begin to discuss how it exists. Now, part of our problem in our world, we don't even get our terms clear first, so we fight all the time. You know, I say I love you, and you say, oh yes, and I love you. We think we're agreeing. Well, you have one definition, I have another. No wonder we have a divorce. Wars, expectations, unhappy, you know. But this is being very scientific and precise. What is a cup? Get your definition clear. Get your agreement. So once we've accepted conventionally, by convention, by agreement, that a cup is a flat bottom container that holds tea, now we can begin to look into it. Now we can begin to discuss. So therefore, that is an object of knowledge. That is an existent. All those terms refer to things that exist. Okay, now what Buddha's saying is this. Once we've established that a cup, a flat bottom container that holds my tea, tea. You know, oh, we haven't finished agreeing upon what it is yet. As His Holiness says, you first establish the name, definition, it fulfills its definition. That's why you can't just say anything's a cup. You've got to define it and say it holds my tea. You've got to prove it holds tea. Otherwise you can give any name to anything, and that's just rubbish. You can't. You've got to prove it holds my tea. You pour it in. Now though, you've got to do some more things. You've got to now check there are no other valid cognitions in other minds that contradict that. And once you've established that, you can now sign the contract. Now we know what a cup is. We now have all agreed, we all shake hands, that is a cup. And now we can begin to discuss it. So now what Buddha's saying is this. Once you've established a cup, that's what dependent arising means. Dependent arising is the as His Holiness says, the Buddhist slogan. That's the shorthand for how things exist conventionally. You know, either they talk about sometimes dependent arising means you establish. And remember, one of the synonyms for that which exists is established base. You establish what a cup is. We must agree. And actually, that's how Buddha says everything in the universe exists. Actually, made by the mind. We would like leaping to the end result here, but we'll go through it in stages. So now, what he's saying is that's conventional truth. But so what he's saying is now, ultimate truth is, so conventionally, there is a cup that does exist that holds my tea. Now, as soon as we hear that, what Buddha says, we have this extreme view. We over-exaggerate the cup. Instantly, instantaneously, we hear this as being there is an eternal, permanent, real, inherent cup. As soon as we hear there is a cup that does hold my tea, that does function to hold my tea, straight away we over-exaggerate it. We decorate, as Lama Zopa says, we decorate on top of what is there, layers of characteristics that just aren't there. That's one extreme view that our mind instantly runs to, having this ignorance in the mind. Straight away we hear it, we over-exaggerate the cup. The eternalistic view. That's how they say it. So then what happens is, then Buddha tells us, but there is no cup from its own side. There's no cup from its own side. And that's the shorthand for that is emptiness. And we're going to discuss. As soon as we hear that, we go, oh, we chuck the baby out with the bath water. Do you have that in Swedish? Mm-hmm. It's a great phrase. You throw the baby out with the bath water. This time you throw out too much. Here we put on too much, here we throw out too much. That's the other extreme view, the view of nihilism. As soon as we hear there is no cup from its own side, we can't help but hear there's no cup, period. So these are the two extreme views that our mind runs between like 1,000 times a day, instinctively, because we have this maripa, this ignorance, this self-grasping in the mind, which is the root delusion that gives rise to attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, and all the other rubbish. So this is what we have to rectify. This is what we have to rectify. So in the Heart Sutra, for example, it says, form is empty. Form, it could be anything. It's just he's taking the first of the five aggregates, which is matter. You could say cup is empty. You could say toilet is empty. Whatever you want to posit as existing. Anything you want to posit as existing. Let's say toilet. Let's say clock. Let's say pee-pee. Let's say anger. Let's say enlightenment. Let's say hell realm. We establish it, we label it, we define it, we agree upon it, then we can talk about it. So whatever exists, any one of those established bases, every one of those phenomena, we would say, very simply, that which exists, a cup, is empty. Okay, we're going to go into what that means yet. And then he says, emptiness is form. Now we get confused. Yeah. So it says cup is empty, emptiness is cup. Well, technically, that's not correct. I'm not being clever here. I'm just quoting His Holiness. Okay. So what it means is, that's what I want to start to unpack now. What it means is, because the two truths, you can't have one without the other. They're like flip side of the same coin. Initially, it doesn't appear to us. We see them as opposite. No cup is a cup. Which one? Come on, Buddha, make up your mind. You know? In reality, it's the same. So you could say cup is empty of existing from its own side, no question. And then we have emptiness of cup. Emptiness, in square brackets, of cup, is cup. Meaning you can't have emptiness of cup without a cup. And you can't begin to put, meaning into these words, because they're all extremely tasty, experiential, not some kind of mystical cosmic idea, which is how we tend to think about it, And part of our big problem is we don't unpack these terms properly. So someone said, I've been thinking about emptiness for 30 years, and I just don't understand it. That's like saying, well, I've been hearing about, computer science for 30 years, and I just don't understand it. Because you mystify computer science and assume it's too difficult. No, it's called laziness. It's all there to be understood in words. You've got to have the words first. So let's look at the word empty, emptiness, and try and unpack how it's used, because that's our big problem here. The one of them, okay? All right. Okay. All right, here I have my cup again. So now, just a minute, please. Okay, would we all agree that that colour is not red, isn't it? So why do we know that? Let's just unpack it for a second. Why do we know it's not red? It's not tricky. Just try and be brave. Say an answer. Why do we know it's not red?
We've conventionally agreed on it.
We've agreed that it's blue, isn't it? And our eyes work in a certain way, with the lighting working a certain way, and the eyes hit this, and it appears blue. And we all, so we all agree it's blue, don't we? And the conventional reality of eye consciousness and lights, it works, and it becomes blue for us. Now let's say, what's your name?
Nicholas.
Nicholas. Let's say Nicholas is colourblind. Possible, right? Now I don't know if this is possible, but let's pretend it is. Let's say every time blue appears to Nicholas's eye consciousness, it appears as red. Let's just say that. It's possible, isn't it? So basically we know, conventionally speaking, that's a wrong cognition, isn't it? It's a delusion, isn't it? It ain't red, is it? It's not red. But he sees red. Now, we wouldn't just bully him into believing it's blue, because he gets nervous, He really sees blue, but I've got to think it's red, and it's very confusing. So if we could, we would try to fix the problem, wouldn't we? We'd take him to the doctor and fix his eyes and check up he's got the right word for blue and red and all these things, and check his glasses. You understand? You'd fix the problem as possible, yeah? Now this is the point. When he looks at it again, what will he see this time? We fix the problem, okay? What will he see now?
Blue.
Any other ideas?
Red.
No, we just fixed the problem. Who said red? Well, why did you say that? We fixed the problem, remember? If we fix the problem, if we fix the problem, it means there's no problem now. So he's going to see the truth, isn't he? So that he couldn't see red. If we haven't fixed the problem, then I agree with you. So the answer is blue, is it? Shall I tell you what he'll see instead? First, he will go, oh my God, it's not red. Won't he say that? Why would he say that? Why would he get shocked?
It's never seen blue before.
Huh?
It's never seen blue before.
Huh? No. Why? Why would you get shocked?
Because he thought it's red.
Because he has thought until now, all his life, every time he sees blue, it appears red, right? So he expects red, doesn't he? He expects red, doesn't he? He expects red. You agree? And and then finally, blue is appearing to him, but he won't just go, oh, it's blue. He'll go, oh my God, it's not red. That is a very vivid cognition, and that's called, what he actually saw was the emptiness of red. That's how the word is used. Absence of red. So listen to this one. Listen to this one. I like this example. I made this one up recently. It's a very nice one. Let's say you believe you've got 10,000 krona in your savings account. Okay? Just a little amount. But you've been working hard, saving it up. You know your 10,000 krona are there. I mean, you know with 1,000,000,000% certainty, because you worked hard and stored it away in the bank. And you open up the bank statement online, right? Now listen to this. And there's a zero there. Now, believe me, you won't see a zero. What will Nicholas see if it's his 10,000 krona? What will Nicholas see when the zero appears to him? What will he see?
Absence of 10,000.
Thank you. And that's a kind of powerful cognition, isn't it? You won't just go, oh, there's nothing in the bank. I would. If he asked me to look and say, what's the answer? I'd just say, oh, there's nothing in the bank, Nicholas. But all he will see is the absence of his 10,000 precious krona. Can you hear the point? That's a cognition of the absence of 10,000 krona. Well, that's how they use the word emptiness. The Buddha says, for eons upon eons, since beginningless time, we have always seen and believed in a thing called inherent I. We'll go into that in a minute, what it is. But we've seen an I that doesn't exist. We've seen a fantasy eye, and in a fantasy everything else. Right? So when you finally have done all the hard work, all the purifying, all the working, all the meditating, all the cognizing, all the analysis, all the deconstructing, all the hard work, the first time you have your first non-conceptual direct insight into reality, that's the first second you will see the absence of the fantasy eye. And that's your first direct realization of emptiness. And from that second, you can't fall back. I mean, you're going to have lots of little steps on the way, intellectual understandings, but finally, when you have your first real insight into emptiness, when you first cognize the vivid phenomenon called the absence of the inherent I, like you saw the absence of his 10,000 krona, the absence of the red on the cup. You with me, people? You with me? Can you hear that concept? So this is why it is not nihilism. And that's what it means. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. In other words, I'll go more to that. We have a tendency to think it's either no I or there is an I. We can't hear it in the middle, which is the middle way, which says that dependent arising and emptiness actually are pointing to the same thing. But initially we can't hear it. We either think, make up your mind, Buddha, there's either no I or there is an I. And that's how delusions work. But it's much more nuanced than that. So, you know, we tend to think, like His Holiness says, when you do this searching for the I, or you're looking for the krona, you throw out all the krona and you end up with nothing and go, oh well, there's no krona. That is not emptiness. Emptiness is this vivid, powerful recognition of the absence of what you thought was there. Can you hear that? Huge, massive. I mean, emptiness of red is bad enough, easy enough. The shock of the no krona. The fact is red could exist, krona could exist, but the apparently inherent I can never exist. I'm going to go into that. But I'm trying to get us to understand the usage of the word emptiness. It's not merely nothingness. This is the worst understanding. It's the worst. It's better to have the eternalistic view of a creator than to have a nihilistic view, they say. Because the eternalistic view is personified in the creative religions. That's the philosophy, that there is some inherent permanent being called a god or a soul. And that's what Buddha's arguing with. So it's really nuanced, it's subtle. But we've got to get a way to understand the use of the word emptiness. Are we communicating here?
Yeah.
The absence of what we thought was there. It's a massive, and as Amazopa says, I don't know if I've got it in here for you guys, if I published it. I don't know if I printed it. His teaching of Rinpoche is very powerful. He says, when you've got that first insight, no, I haven't got it in here, I'm so sorry. Oh, no, I haven't got it in here, I'm stupid use, I didn't put it in. I tried to keep the pages small, but I should have put more, never mind. I can send you all a PDF of the more teachings if you like. I can usually do that, send you the PDF, you can forward it to people. But as he says, when you got your first, when you see this absence of the fantasy I for the first time in the subtlety of your meditation, he says there are two main responses to it. One is unbelievable fear, which is really good. Because we have fear all the time. You don't think it means just seeing emptiness. No, just having a panic attack. And the other one, even more superior, is complete bliss. That you've seen the absence for the first time of the I that you believed in that has never existed and could never exist. And that has been the source of all your suffering since beginningless time. So it's a stupendous thing to get to see. And of course it doesn't come overnight. We do it first gradually, conceptually, slowly, get little pennies dropping, insights into it. But the key thing, main one I'm trying to get here is the way the use of the word emptiness. It is not nothingness. It can't be nothingness. So let me prove that. Okay. So we can talk about blue in general, can't we? Because we've all seen blue, haven't we? We can have a good discussion about blue, the different kinds of blue, we can be very intelligent about it, right? But that's intellectual, isn't it? If you want the direct experience of blue, what would you need to have in front of you? Say it. It's obvious. If you want the direct experience, what experience is blue? Which part of you?
The eyes.
Thank you. So what do you need in front of you to have a direct experience of blue?
Something blue.
Thank you. Perfect. So we can talk about blue in general, but let's now have an experience of blue. You've got to have a cup that possesses blue as a characteristic. Just hear that. So would you agree that blue is a characteristic of this cup? Isn't it? And you've got to have a thing that's blue, isn't it? Because blue is a colour on something, isn't it? You agree? So, okay, now, do you agree that this cup is not red? We can talk about the absence of red in general, can't we? We can talk about the absence of red. It sounds a bit abstract. We can talk about the absence of red in general, can't we? We know it's a possibility for there not to be red somewhere. Yeah? But if you want a direct experience of the absence of red, what would you need in front of you? Same answer, but just change the words. Say it.
And something not red.
Something that possesses the characteristic of the absence of red. Speaking like a Buddhist.
Yeah.
Do you understand? You hear me? You with me? And that would be a blue cup, wouldn't it? You with me? You sure? Okay, good. We can talk about emptiness of inherent existence, and we haven't even begun to talk about what inherent existence means yet. But let's just pretend we know. There's a thing called emptiness of inherent existence. Oh no, two more things. Okay, sorry, several things. Buddha's talking, remember I said before, there's these synonyms for that which exists, and he's trying to get us to see that which exists. So do we agree that blue exists on this cup?
Yeah.
We do, don't we? Do we agree, for Nicholas, once he has seen the truth, that there is a phenomenon called absence of red? It is a real phenomenon that his mind can cognize. So it seems abstract, isn't it? But it is a real phenomenon, isn't it? The absence of red for Nicholas is a real phenomenon, yeah? And that absence of red exists where?
On the cup.
On this blue cup, isn't it? The absence of red, we can talk about it in general, can't we? But you've got to, so what would you want? Again, repeat, you need something that possesses the characteristic of the absence of red to have a direct experience of the absence of red. You with me, people? All right. All right. Buddha is saying that everything that exists necessarily is empty of existing from its own side, one of the many synonyms, or is empty of inherently existing. So, okay, we can turn that around and say that every phenomenon possesses a characteristic called absence of inherent existence. Every phenomenon possesses, so every cup possesses the characteristic of emptiness of inherent cup. So emptiness of inherent cup is a characteristic of a cup, isn't it? Can you hear that? Like absence of red is the characteristic. You've got to just get your head around the words, okay? I'll try to say them more slowly. I'm getting at that everything that can be cognized by the mind is called a phenomenon. Whatever the mind can cognize is called a phenomenon. So normally we'd say, oh my God, it's not red. So you turn that into a noun, and it's called absence of red. It's a vivid phenomenon. So you can cognize blue, and you can cognize absence of red. So they're both equal in being objects of the mind, aren't they? They're both being true in their being existent phenomena. The definition of an existent is something that can be cognized by your mind. So absence of red can be cognized, can't it? Blue can be cognized. So the blue are the straightforward. Blue, cup, lid, they're the ordinary impermanent phenomena. But these other ones, I think Alex Berzin refers to them as abstract phenomena. And it's true, a dog couldn't cognize absence of red. It's got to be clever to have. And it's got to only be the person who thinks it was red that would see absence of red, isn't it? It's a very particular thing. Okay. Now, there's another phenomenon called a person. We have to, person, I, or self, they're all synonymous. It's a type of phenomenon, a living being, okay? They're terms. A person, or a Buddha is a person. A dog is a person. A held being is a person. A human is a person. It's a term for a type of phenomenon that possesses a mind, okay? You with me, people? That's a type of phenomenon. So a person does exist conventionally. A person does exist. You know, Robina is the name of a particular person, Australian nun, blah, blah, whatever the definition is. So that person conventionally exists, sitting on this cushion in Gothenburg. You agree? Nicholas is the name of another person sitting on that cushion in this centre in Gothenburg. Conventionally, that's a true statement. You agree? Like there's a cup on my table. There's a clock on my table. So clock, cup, person. They've all got equal status in being conventional phenomena. Are we in agreement?
Yeah.
Okay. Now Buddha's saying every phenomenon, conventional phenomenon, possesses the characteristic of being empty of inherent existence. We haven't discussed what it is yet. Don't worry about it. You with me? So, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is nothing other than emptiness. Emptiness is nothing other than form. Meaning, you can't have the absence of red without a blue cup, can you? You've got to have a blue cup in order to discover the absence of red. Would you agree? So you can't possibly have absence of red doesn't mean you throw everything out and there's just nothing left. Do you see what I'm saying? It's nonsense. You've got to have a cup that possesses blueness in order to discover the absence of red on it. So you've got to have a cup before you have emptiness. You've got to have a person before you find the absence of inherent person. You've got to have a person conventional, so you can, meaning it can't be nihilistic. We think it is. We throw it out. Even Buddhists say, oh, well, it's all empty, it doesn't matter anyway. That is a nihilistic statement, wrong view. It's much more nuanced than that. And once we get used to the use of the terms, we can use them more richly, you know. So you've got to be able to point to a blue cup before you can talk about the absence of red on that blue cup. You can't have absence of red without a blue cup, in Nicholas's case. And you can't have emptiness of self without a self. How could you? You've got to have a conventional self that possesses the characteristic of being empty, of being an inherent self. Do you see what I'm saying? So when you know this, this is the bringing together of the two truths. So it's Tsongkhapa, you know, our Gelugpa saint, our what do we call, what's it say when you're Catholic? Your patron saint, whatever. The Gelugpa patron saint, Tsongkhapa. His particular way of bringing the two truths together. He says, every time we think there is a cup, we go, oh, thank God there's a cup. Grasp. We over-exaggerate, you know, so believe there is something after all. No, he says, don't be ridiculous. Every time you think, oh, thank God there's a cup, you go, no, Robina, that means there is no cup from its own side. Now, every time we hear there is no cup from its own side, instead of chucking the baby out of the bathwater, we go, ha-ha, Robina, that means there is a dependent arising cup. So the two truths point to each other. And it's a really good exercise. Whenever you think emptiness and you tend towards nihilism and the mind goes there, you consciously tell yourself, no, Robina, that means there is a cup that does function. And every time you think there's a cup and you grasp at it, you think, no, Robina, that means there is no cup from its own side. And the middle way is between these two. The real middle way is only when you become a Buddha and you see simultaneously the emptiness and the dependent arising. Because they, in fact, point to each other. You know? This is the Prasangika Vajranikiti, which all our lamas tell us that they all teach. You know, all they intimate with each other. Are we communicating here? Any questions, please, before we continue? 20 past 4. Any questions for clarification? We can unpack this stuff more and start looking at the meaning of emptiness of inherent existence. I'll have a snack while you're thinking about questions. Yes, Nicholas?
No, I have a fundamental question. If, because having a body, so being materialized in form, we are destined to suffer. And one saying I hear very often, or also repeat is, one saying I hear very often, or I also often repeat, is I will stay here in samsara as long as there's suffering in order to free sentient beings. Does that mean that as long as there are materialized things, there will be samsara? That means all the Buddhas are still under us.
Under?
I mean, they're still with us. Because they're still...
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, this is an interesting point because the Hinayanas say, you might notice in the Hinayana teachings, it says that the bodhisattvas will hold back from becoming a Buddha until all sentient beings are enlightened. And they say that because the Hinayana teachings say that when you've achieved your liberation, you disappear. There's nothing left. Not a single atom of your mind is left. They say your mind finishes. So then you wouldn't become a Buddha. You stay only as a bodhisattva because you wouldn't want to disappear. Whereas the Mahayana says become a Buddha as quick as possible because your mind can never end. And so yes, Buddhas vow to never stop manifesting throughout all the universes for as long as sentient beings exist. That's right. That's what they do.
So they will forever exist as long as material...
Buddhas are always existing. Mind never ends.
Oh.
Okay, the use of the word Buddha, the actual Buddha, there's absolute Buddha and relative Buddha. The actual Buddha is the word Buddha is referring to the pure, omniscient, all-knowing, all-compassionate consciousness, which is not physical, it's not embodied. But out of compassion, that mind manifests in billions of bodies as long as sentient beings are existing. So yeah, they're perpetually manifesting as dogs and hell beings, as cups and rocks and toilets and Lord knows what. They'll manifest as anything to benefit sentient beings, as long as sentient beings exist. Yeah, that's the promise of the Buddhas. Yeah?
Okay.
Okay. What else? People?
You said we can't have And that means that there is a self.
Yeah, conventionally, we just established.
Ah, yeah.
There is a self,
Yeah.
conventional self.
There is
But
a
the trick
self.
is to know what that means, and we're going to go into that. The trick is, what does that mean?
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the question.
That's the big question. So there is a cup, there is a clock, there is a toilet, there is enlightenment, there is hell realm, there is caca, there is existing from their own side, and that's the tricky part. Putting these two truths together, that's the trick. That's the hard work. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about that. Okay. As we know, Buddha taught different views. Coming out of the Hindu tradition, he kept on going. He heard the Hindu teachings, and they all do posit, and there's even different views within the Hindus, of course, and I don't know them all, I'm sorry, I don't know any of them. But there is definitely the view that they do posit that there is an atma, or a self. The equivalent word in the West would be the soul. Okay? Or self, the way the Buddhists, the materialists talk, but they're not so articulate because everyone has a different view, isn't it? So, okay, the Hindus would assert their findings. They've got rid of so much. They've got these amazing great yogis who've got single point of concentration, they've achieved samadhi, they've got visions, they've got see the past, they see the future, they're highly realised. But as far as the Buddha's concerned, that's why he continued on his way and diverged into his own path. They still posit that there is something there. And that's the term, that's the one, this is this eternalistic view, that there is something that is permanent, doesn't change from moment to moment, doesn't have causes, so and is existing there. So there are different levels of argument according to the different views in Buddhism. When you study Buddhist tenets, you learn all these variations, We'll just speak about them simply. So the very first view that all Buddhists disagree with is that there is something that is permanent and eternalistic and existing from its own side, that's out there, but doesn't change from moment to moment. All the Buddhist schools agree with that. And so you could say the very first, the absence of that one, and I forget all the right words, I'm sorry, is the gross selflessness of most of the Buddhist schools, except the Prasangika Madhyamika. There are several. There's roughly four schools of thought in the Buddhist tenets, many variations of these. There's the two views of the Hinayana school of thought. One of them is called Theravada, which apparently is the only remaining of the 18 sub-schools of the Hinayana views of interpretation of self, etc., etc. Then they've got two of those, and each different from the other, Vaibhashika and then Sautrantika. And then you've got two Mahayana views, the Chittamatra, and then you've got the middle way, and then you've got a couple of variations of those. And there are sub-schools of all of these, and I forget, I'm sorry, I studied them years ago, but I can't remember all. So just roughly speaking here, the general idea is that each of these, so they've got a view of gross selflessness. All the Buddhist schools would disagree with that one. Now, then the subtle selflessness, for most of the other Buddhist schools, and they all vary slightly, they all do still posit that there is something. They all posit, and it's usually something in the mind that they say is the self. So there are two main ways of saying this. One, when you do, I don't know if you read the Lamrim or the different, there's this two options for the self. Either there is a self that is completely separate from the parts. So, okay, Buddha's really crucial point is, everything that does exist conventionally is made of parts. It's made of bits and pieces. One of the misconceptions that Buddha's arguing with, which is in the first one, is that there are no parts, it's partless. That this God, the creator, the soul, the Atma, doesn't have parts. And every Buddhist school would agree with that everything has parts. Even a moment of mind has parts. This moment of anger, that moment of anger. Everything has parts. It's fundamental in the Buddhist teachings. Everything has parts. So everything that exists is made of bits and pieces. A lid is made of bits and pieces. A cup is made of bits and pieces. A person is made of bits and pieces. Buddha would use the example of the 5 aggregates, 5 bits and pieces. So, one of the arguments, when you're doing the searching for the I, you're either looking for an I that is separate from the bits and pieces, which is the argument with the Hinayana, the Hindu school, that they say there is the permanent, and that's what a creator is. That's what a soul is. It's, you've got your body and your mind and your soul. And Buddha would say it's not necessary embellishment. You don't need an extra bit. You just don't need it. Not necessary. Like we don't need a creator. There's an unnecessary embellishment, he's basically saying, because consciousnesses are beginningless and they create themselves moment by moment, which is the teaching on karma, which we'll talk about. So, you have to first look at that one. Then the other one, which is the Prasangika's view, argument with the other Buddhist schools, that there is an I in there among the parts. So we either have a view that there is an I separate from the parts, or we think, which is the other Buddhist schools, there is an I in there among the parts. Which is when you do this analysis, you're looking at the 4-point analysis of it, looking for the I. So this one is the harder one to look at. And the Prasangika Madhyamika would say there is nothing among the parts or separate from the parts that is an I. So what they say is that I, this is subtle dependent arising, this is the subtlest meaning of emptiness. Excuse me. And that is that among the parts you will not find even an atom of anything that is inherent. And the word inherent is the simplest one. Inherent, there's many synonyms. In the Prasangika Madhyamika school, there's many synonyms for inherent. In each of the other schools, they're all used slightly differently. Truly existent, existing from its own side, existing in and of itself, existing naturally, existing inherently. So the inherent one is the best one, which is the Prasangika Madhyamikas use, and that means that if something did exist inherently, it would have to exist without depending on anything. And all this view is saying, you will not find anything in the universe that doesn't depend upon something for its existence. This is the meaning of dependent arising. There's different levels of it. You'll never find anything. But this, for the other Buddhist schools, the Prasangika Madhyamika school would say is too scary. You've got to find something. That's why they say that this view is so radical. It's like you're jumping off the cliff, you know. To say that from the side of the parts, which is where you have to search, this is the basis of the label. The parts of the cup, the parts of the person, the parts of the paper, the parts of the microphone, the clock, whatever it might be. You've got parts and then you have a label on those parts. And we've got to search among those parts for what we think is that I, in this case the self. And all Buddha's saying is when you finally have done the subtlest analysis, you will come to the conclusion that there is not an atom of anything among the parts that could be inherent. And this is the subtlest meaning. This is the one you finally come to. Merely labels. Merely labels. Subtly dependent arising. So we have to do this analysis, in other words. That's what they study for years and then do meditating for years to come to the direct experiential insight into this truth. And we first have to understand it intellectually. Don't misunderstand. Don't think you shouldn't. It's crucial to have clear intellectual understanding. It can be very already profound test. So the ultimate view is that from the side of the parts, which is where you have to search, this is the basis of the I. A person, everything that exists is made up of parts. So you've got to look among the parts, not somewhere else. You can't look for the parts of a cup in a lid, that's stupid. Don't be in the cup. Where's the inherent cup? Where's the inherent I? So they say you won't find anything. But the other schools, each of them slightly differently, say there is something. There is something. There has to be something, otherwise it's not holistic. And this is why they say the subtlest view is there's no contradiction between saying there is a cup that does function and there is no cup. This is where these two have to come together. And that's the part that's hard. That's why they talk, Lama Zopa says, once you realize the emptiness of the inherent self, the absence of the inherent self, once you realize the lack of an inherent self among the parts, that's what you're searching. It's as if is no self. But there is. But what does exist is so subtle, it is as if it does not exist. It is as if it is an illusion. Or as we would say in the West, you have this in Swedish, it's all smoke and mirrors. The magicians, that's a really nice phrase. In other words, it looks like something's happening, it appears it, but when you start to search, it's just smoke and mirrors. That's a perfect analogy. That's the perfect way they're talking with these two truths. So that there's no danger of throwing the baby out in the bathwater. And they all say the nihilistic view is the worst one, the deepest suffering. Better to have a belief in a creator. That's why the two truths is an amazing, wonderful, grounding way to frame your understanding of emptiness. So instinctively right now, because we have this maripa, because we have this deep primordial ignorance that clings to the inherent self as an absolute belief, even as we hear the words, there is no I from its own side, we can't help but hear there is no I, period. We just can't help it. And every time we hear that there is a conventional existent I, we can't help but grasp at it, because this is instinctive. That's why we have to be very skillful intellectually first, to train our minds to say, at least say the right words, that it can lead to a valid experience. It's like if you don't have the proper musical theory, how can you have a valid experience in Bach? You'll keep playing the wrong note. You've got to have valid theory first, which looks boring, but then you can channel that into the direct experience of Bach. It's like that. So never underestimate conception. Okay, there are two main kinds of practitioners, Tsongkhapa says. Those who go straight into the experience, due to some... This is the kind of cliche view of Kargyupas, isn't it? Any Kargyupas here? You understand what I'm saying? If we have these cliche views, as Lama Yesi says, the cliche view of the Gelugpas is that we squeeze our brains, you know? Then this cliche view of the Kargyupas, they go off and practice. So the Kargyupa style is you go off and do all your nundros and your practice, you have faith in the Buddha, and then from all your meditating and your purifying, you will get some experience, and then you can articulate it. That's that one type of practitioner. I'm not meaning the Kargyupas, because there are people like this. And the other one is kind of you go through the method I'm talking here. You go through the intellectual, the theory, which is how we learn everything in the West. We're geniuses intellectually. We learn even all our musical theory, our artistic theory, our computer theory. It's all theory first and then experience, isn't it? Do you understand? There's these two main kinds. So we've all got to have both kinds, you know? When you do your Mahamudra and your Dzogchen, don't get anywhere near theory. When you do your Tantra, don't leave the theory alone, you know? Get the experience. Going to break out.
It's fun.
5 o'clock. What are you going to do? Have something to eat or something? What's the plan?
Yeah, and those snacks.
Snacks. Well, I'd like you to get into little groups and have discussions. Have your snack and have your discussion. I'd very much like you to do that if you'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
It's helpful. I always remember when I studied philosophy with my philosophy teacher, Geshe Tekchon, he said that, always would say, that 25% of what you get comes from listening. 75% comes from debate, discussion, thinking, and meditating. Which makes sense. But anyway, before that, any questions? It's only 25. We've got hours to go yet. Any more questions so far? We've already covered a lot of information. Okay, let's start looking into then some of the ways of analysing the parts of me, conventional me, to look for the inherent me. Okay? So this would be, you know, look at it's interesting, our language really misleads us. Our language perpetuates the lie. Because you look at your head when you're talking, think of your head, meaning all your thoughts. All of us all day, we know from the second we wake up until the second we go to sleep, thoughts are going, aren't they? Raging. And who's the central player in those thoughts? We all know, it's called I, isn't it? Isn't it? It's obvious, isn't it? It's just the way the universe is. This is samsara, what it says. It's just the way it is, you know. This central, this I, or me, as the subject, or me as the object, you know. So all the time, this is clear, the I is the central player. So it's just natural. When we say I am this and I am that, and I did this and I did that, and I didn't do that, and it's not fair, I'm not that, and I'm fat, and I'm ugly, and I'm depressed, and I'm angry, and I'm important, whatever of the story is, what Buddha's saying is, when we say that, we instinctively think that that word I does refer to one of the bits in there. In other words, as one of my friends put it, we really believe that there is a little I in there walking hand in hand with the other bits. Do you understand what I'm saying? But we know if you analyse the thing called a self, then you look at the parts. We know that I'm made up of a nose and eyelashes and anger and love and kindness. We've got millions of parts, actually, haven't we? A cup has got many parts, you know? So but the feeling we have is there is another part called I, or there's one of those parts that is the I. You with me? And we believe it utterly and completely. And even as we hear that doesn't exist, we kind of, what? Excuse me? Of course it does. It's utterly confusing to us. And this is the type of analysis we have to do. You know? First understanding intellectually, and then experientially learning to find different ways to hear our thoughts talking, different ways to argue with ourselves, different language to use, just to try and trick ourselves into really checking carefully. What do we mean by that I? How do we think it exists?
A big problem is that if you think that you have not an I, you can ask yourself who is thinking. I mean, there
Okay,
is
good.
no point
Stop right there.
thinking.
Good. Let's analyse that. What's your name?
Nadia.
Nadia. Okay, good Nadia. Okay. So do we accept that Nadia is a name for this particular person sitting here, isn't it? Nicholas is there, Robina's here. Okay. So we agree that Nadia has many parts, is that true? She has knees and elbows and noses and eyelashes and thoughts. Does she have thoughts as well? Does she have thoughts? And will she recognise angry thoughts, jealous thoughts, loving thoughts? Yeah? She's got virtuous and non-virtuous thoughts as part of her, yeah, her mind. We accept this? Okay, good. So, Nadia does certain activities, would that be true? She does activities day to day. She does thinking, she does picking up things, she does going to sleep, she goes to the toilet, she eats, she does different activities, yes? Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so we say, let's say Robina, I'll say I'm holding a cup. You accept that? You accept?
Yes.
Let's be analytical about it. Shall we be analytical? What part of Robina is holding the cup?
Your hand,
Thank you. And what part of the hand is holding the cup?
your fingers.
And what, you see my point, what part of the, if we have to be really analytical to train a person who doesn't know how to pick up a cup, and we have to train them, we have to say, well, the finger goes there, the thumb goes there, the joint bends this way, and if you describe it in great detail, you can describe exactly the angle of the joints, the muscles, the ligaments, everything does their job. There's millions of parts involved in that. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So when you're precise about, when you're general about it, it's correct to say, I am holding a cup. But when you're really precise, the more precise you get, you will never get to any part where you say, and then the part that's the I that holds the cup. You won't find that bit, because there's only ever parts, aren't there? There's the fingers, the joints, the ligaments, the skin, the bone. Would you accept my point? You keep being more analytical. You'll never, ever come to say there's a part in there called little baby Nadia or little baby Robina holding the cup. Because Robina is a name we give to the parts. Now,
Yes.
Nadia, I'm going to your point, please.
Yes.
So now we have the activity of Nadia's called thinking. Accept? So it's true to say, you know, okay, Nadia might say, I am watching my breath. Shall we say that? There's a particular activity Nadia could do. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Let's analyse. Which part of Nadia is watching the breath? Answer my question. Which part?
Which part? My conscious,
Your mind.
my mind,
Good enough. Which part of your mind is watching your breath?
my awareness.
And what else is helping you? Many, not just one piece is holding the cup. Many parts are all working together beautifully. So, which parts of your mind are all working together for you to have an awareness of breath? Now, if you don't know Buddhist psychology, you don't know the answer, and that's why you can't work out the I, because you don't even know the words of your parts of your mind, because we don't study Buddhist psychology, Nadia. That's our problem. Well, you see my point? You know, if you didn't know joint, finger, skin, you couldn't answer the question properly. You can't analyse. How there's no I holding the cup. So the same with your mind, Nadia. You have to know the answer when it comes to Buddha's view. So I'm telling you, there's many, many of your parts of your mind all working beautifully and harmoniously for you to have a cognition of breath. But you will never ever find a little piece in there who is called Nadia, who is watching your breath. You've got to find awareness, and that's helped by mindfulness, which is helped by alertness, which is helped by concentration, which is helped by discrimination. To have a cognition of breath. It's like that. Everything you do, you will do that, and you will never find a Nadia. Are we communicating? That's the analysis. But if you don't know the words, you can't analyze. If you didn't know anatomy, you couldn't do that analysis.
Yeah, but what you say is that the thinking that we do is thinking by them. They think by themselves.
What?
The thinking.
Thinking, yeah, it's a process.
Is thinking by itself.
That's the point, Nadia. But we all want there to be a little mini Nadia in there. But Buddha says you don't need one. All the thoughts do fine on their own. We all think there's a little landlord in there called Nadia running the show. You don't need a landlord. All the bits and pieces work beautifully together. That's why Buddha says you don't need a creator. Everybody who says, like you talk to a Muslim, it's so brilliant, there's got to be a big brain doing it. Buddha says rubbish. You don't need a boss. Things work nicely on their own. It's a good way of putting it. It's scary, because we want there to be a boss, so we can blame somebody. We want there to be an I, so we can have self-hate.
So,
Yeah.
so there's a sense then, what the finger is holding the cup there, but then there is a sense of an intention to hold the cup.
There is an intention, of course.
Yeah.
That's another part. Hey, that's just another part.
Yeah, I'm interested in the parts of the intention, the sense.
Well, that's something different. That's another discussion. Darling, for the purposes of for the purposes of you holding a cup, another part that does play a very big role is the thought, I will hold the cup. Of course, otherwise your fingers will drop it. Of course, this is another part. So we could discuss intention. That's another discussion though. For the purposes of holding a cup, intention is one of the many parts doing its work. Of course it is. Otherwise your fingers would collapse and not bother. The mind has to be running it.
Yeah, but it seems to be close to the sense of there being an I.
No,
The
that's
sense
just what
of
you're saying. You're just saying that.
Uh-huh.
You just want it to be that way. It's not an I. Why do you want there to be an I? It's just your mind. Start analysing all the parts of your mind that are holding the cup. Well, that's not an I. That's just it's not like I said about her watching the breath. There's no difference. Every time you analyse, you'll always analyse the bits and pieces that are doing the job, but you won't find a piece called an I. But you've got to do the analysis to prove that to yourself.
Yeah.
Well, what are you nodding at me for?
Yeah, because I'm searching for the analysis of the sense of intentionality.
What? You're making it too complicated. Speak.
Maybe I am.
You are.
Like the,
So what's your question? What's the question, darling?
the question is that there. Okay. Often, my experience will be that what pulls me back into a perception of there being an I is that there is somehow that I have an intention. That
Darling, it's far too complicated. Can we really get it down to yes? What's your name?
Oh,
Sorry?
Åse.
Spell it.
Åse. It's A with a circle on top of it.
Or
S-E.
or S-E. Åse. Okay, Åse, listen. What is the name of the action you'd like to analyse? Let's take an action. We took two actions here. One was holding a cup. One was I am holding a cup. The other one is I am watching my breath. So what's the action you'd like to analyse? Be precise. Let's take an action of Åse that we'd like to analyse.
I think it, I mean...
Give an example of an action that Åse does.
Okay.
We can analyse.
Oh, is that an action? Yeah,
I'm sorry,
it's
it's
an
got to
action.
be everything's an action.
The will to do
Huh?
something. The will.
A decision to do something. So
Yeah.
can you give an example of a decision you're going to make? It can be I hold a cup. I can be I wash my breath. What's the difference?
let's use the cup.
Good. Okay then. So
Yeah.
we've looked at the parts of the hand,
Yeah.
haven't we? But so what propels the hand to hold the cup?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm asking you, Åse, analyse it. Because we're going to do the analysis and it'll come your answer. So then analyse the parts of Åse that are doing that. What is the name of that part of Åse? It's called the mind. Åse is made of body and mind. Do we agree?
Yeah. sure.
Mind is thoughts. Do you accept?
Yeah.
Mind is thoughts. So now we know the hand is all the bits of the skin, the bones, the ligaments, they're doing their job. Now let's look at what it is that sustains the holding, and that's called the mind. Oh, says
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
So let's look at the different parts of her mind, just like we talked about eye
Yeah.
watching the breath. Well, then keep doing it yourself. What are the parts of your mind doing the job of causing the hand to hold a cup? What parts of your mind will be involved here?
Yep. I don't know all the words for it.
Well, then you better find it, otherwise you can't do the analysis.
Oh.
So the first one would be the intention. So, okay, intention or volition or will.
Yeah.
This is, in Buddhist psychology, that is the meaning of the word karma. When your mind, when a part of your mind is called intention, it's one of the always present mental factors. Every millisecond that your body and mind are doing something, intention is the main one. Intention is the thought, I will hold a cup.
Yeah.
So your intention, there's a piece of your mind called intention. That's the main one. Because the moment you think, I won't hold a cup, guess what will happen? You'll put the cup down, won't you? So intention is the main one. But also helped by, like I said, discrimination. Helped by alertness. Helped by all the other pieces of your mind that make you a reasonable person. But the key one is intention. I will hold the cup.
Yeah.
Well then, what are you getting so
So
excited
my
about?
question is-
Oh, sir, one step at a time. You get too excited. Calm down. I'm excited, but go one step at a time. You take that. Can you hear? There's a part of Ursa's mind called intention.
Yeah.
Can you hear that?
I hear that.
Well, that is the part you're talking about. Now,
Yeah.
the question is, why do you want to make that an I? What a silly idea. Why do you want to make that an I? I said, why? You've called it intention. You've called it intention. It's enough. Why aren't you happy with just that? Why do you want
what
more?
makes the
Awesome. You've got to follow my thinking. You get your answer. If you really, but you're leaping ahead.
maybe I do.
That's right. So think about it. Osa is made up of many parts. One part is physical, and we've looked at all the parts that are helping to hold onto the cup. Now, even your mind, now you're too excited. You can see you're racing ahead with your idea. You're not listening. You're just not listening. You're racing ahead trying to prove there's an I in there because you want there to be one. So try and listen. Analysis means you've got to really do it.
Yeah.
Okay, we've looked at how there are parts of the hand that actually do the job of holding the cup. Can you accept that if we analyse, there's going to be probably hundreds, if not thousands of pieces all doing their work? Would you agree?
Yeah.
And if we really look into all that, we can see there's no little part of those that we could call I. There's no need to, is there? There's no need to, is there? Can you hear that? Now the mind, now let's look at the mind. That's your thoughts, isn't it? That's your thoughts. Mind is your thoughts, right? And one of the key ones is I will pick up the cup, which is what causes your eyes to go there, the hand to go there, and all the fingers to do their job to pick up the cup. And as long as there is the intention, I will hold the cup, I will drink my tea, then intention is playing that role. Supported by many other parts of your mind. Discrimination is a crucial one, which is an ability in your mind, a thought, that can distinguish between the lid and the cup, so you don't pick up the lid instead. There's another one called alertness, which is checking what you're doing as you're about to pick it up. The more you analyse in your mind, you're going to find different pieces of your mind, just like there are different pieces of your body. And the more you analyse all those pieces, and there are probably hundreds, the more analytical you are with the microscope of your mind, which is what we must do, you're going to see there is no piece called I that is the intender. There's no I picking it up. There's no I intending. There's no I discriminating. You don't need an extra piece called an I. But we have been in samsara since beginningless time, believing that there is that one, and that's why we're suffering. This analysis, if you do it properly, is a profound way to prove to yourself there is no little mini Ursa in there running the show. That's the type of one example of the type of really clinical analysis we need to do to argue with ego's misconception that desperately wants there to be an I. Are we communicating a little bit?
We are
Ursa?
communicating.
I'm very happy. So off you go and do it. communicating.
May I ask you something?
So, hang on, yeah, go.
I was thinking about the absence of red, and you said that if you're colorblind, then you would be surprised. And I was just thinking, I would be very, if I was colorblind and thought it was red for 20 years, and then I learned that it was blue, then I would be very sad. Or at least
Yeah, that's right, that's fear.
disappointed.
Of course, but that's one of Lamazona's points. When you first see the absence of it, you get the shock of your life because you're so attached to it.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. That's why you have a complete panic attack. Of course, absolutely. But if you're really intelligent, you'll have joy.
So is that, I mean, if you compare that to love, or you think it's love, but it's actually, it's,
What's another discussion now? What are you asking here? What's the topic here? I'm getting
no,
confused. What's the discussion?
the topic is actually, no, the idea of something, and then it's actually, when you see it, when you,
See the truth?
yeah.
It's sad. Of course it is, because you lost the thing
And
you
it's
thought you
always like that.
It's because of attachment, yeah. Attachment is a junkie that only wants the nice things and only wants its own ideas. So it's devastating when we discover that it's not true what attachment was thinking. And it's always painful when we see the truth. Always painful.
So how do you, so you meditate to,
No, don't be simple. Just keep working at yourself. Be brave. Confront the rubbish and be brave, and eventually you develop the habit not to be scared, not to be depressed, not to be unhappy. You get ruthless in a good way. Thanks for compassion. This is wisdom. Wisdom is super clear, super sharp, crystal clear. And you know what? It's unafraid. This is the disturbingness of all these delusions. Interestingly, in our culture, we give fear and panic and anxiety a major role. It's a major, major delusion for most people, isn't it? In Buddhist psychology, if you notice, there's no talk. There's no status given to anxiety, fear, panic, and they're all synonyms in any of the delusions. Do you know why? Because all the delusions, in particular the root delusion, are completely in the nature of fear and panic and anxiety. So this is why, as Amazon says, when you've cut the delusions completely and you've realized emptiness, literally there is no fear. And literally your mind is only blissful. You're literally fearless. Literally fearless. There's no drama, pathetic, self-pity, rubbish, sad, lonely, grasping, nonsense, panic, blah, vomit. It is gone. Can you even imagine how nice that would be? That's why delusions are so, they're like just swimming in shit. They're like full of vomit and emotion, yuck. And look, when you look at two people who are attached and you don't like them, they look repulsive. I'm not being rude now. I am being rude. I love Angelina Jolie. She's now, married to Brad and everything. I think she's great. But when she was in a relationship with Billy Bob Thornton, I read magazines all the time. I learn about human beings, I cannot tell you. But I'm not being mean and personal. They're like the most perfect workshop of like the most junky attachment you've ever seen. I'm not being rude about them. I feel awful to talk about people. But they were talked about it this way. They even drank each other's blood. God knows what else they drank. Confessed to it in public. But you can imagine the intensity. Every photo you saw, they were like Siamese twins. That's the intensity of attachment. So when attachment goes away, this is why it's beyond pain. That, I remember I was I'm a jazz fan. Even now I listen to all those amazing blues and jazz things, and you hear the stories of the loss and the grief. You can taste it, because that's attachment thwarted. Because attachment is this gigantic, bluey, yucky fantasy world that's kind of swimming in fear, and all the delusions are this way. So of course it's sad and lonely when you look at the city delusions and give up the objects. It's terrifying, because fear is in the nature of all the delusions. It's their taste. It's just their taste. We'll go to more dinner after dinner if you like. It's just phenomenal the more we see this. So we've got to be courageous. That's why even all the other Buddhist schools, the Prasangikas would say, is they're scaredy babies. They're too scared to say there's no eye from its own side, because it feels like you're being noticed. You've got to hold on to something. We need to have enormous courage to have this kind of wisdom. Yeah. Nadia.
So we cannot say that yes, there is an eye, but it's not permanent. We have an impermanent eye. We cannot say that. We have no.
Well, why do you want to say that? Well, you're determined to have something, are you?
It was an idea.
No, okay, listen. But it's not subtle enough. No, you can't say that. It's not subtle enough. You're still opposing. You're still saying there is something. But the real idea about this saying there is no I and there is an I, the two truths, which seem contradictory, is the words, we just have to get used to the words of it and by doing the analysis. There is no I, you can't find, like I'm doing this discussion with you and with you, the more you do the analysis of any action you do, what is doing the action, and you start to analyse the bits, this is a perfect way to meditate on it. We keep thinking there's a little I that's running it, we want there to be this. But the more you do that analysis, the more you're going to find, this is what they say, from the side of the parts, you cannot find anything that bears the label I. So that doesn't mean, which is emptiness, that doesn't mean there is no Nadia. So Nadia is a name we give to those parts, and Nadia is Nadia. She goes to the toilet, she goes to bed, she gets up, she goes here, she is this, she's born in Russia or wherever she was born, I don't know where you were born, whatever. But see, as soon as we hear that, we cling, and as soon as we hear it, we get nihilistic. That's our instinct. We've got to find a way to bring these two truths together, because they're not contradictory. And just get in the habit of doing that. It's very tasty for the mind. It's counterintuitive, you know? It's very powerful for the mind. So there is an I, but not from its own side. There is enlightenment, but not from its own side. Everything that exists has the same argument. There is morality, but not from its own side. There is hell realms, but not from their own side. There is this, but not from its own side. We've got to get used to talking like this and get into the habit of putting the meaning into it. You know? Yeah.
I was thinking
Sorry,
about...
go on first.
Oh, sorry.
Go down.
Yes, I was wondering that very subtle I that does exist, but it's as subtle as if it didn't exist.
Yeah, that's right.
What is its function? What does it do?
It's the conventional way of talking. It's merely labelled. It's merely labelled. It's a name given by the mind. That's what they're saying. The mere I. There's no piece you can find though. Even the way you said it, we're implying there's a little tiny piece in there. Not. It's that's why they say merely labelled is the subtlest meaning of dependent arising. It's merely labelled. Merely labelled. Merely labelled by the mind. And it's not in the parts. It's, yeah. It just they say it is the hardest one to get, the subtlest, the most subtle. So we shouldn't be impatient with it, you know. To have all the right analysis, do the right, read the teachings and think about it and do the purifying and do the meditating and slowly, experience comes.
I have a big question.
Go
Well,
on.
think about how Buddhists think about mental illness, because the diagnosis is like a coagulation of parts and pieces. If you say that someone is depressed, for
That's right.
example, and then depression doesn't exist.
What, darling?
Does depression exist? Because if you
Okay,
don't have
the
this,
same discussion. Well, first of all, Buddha would say we're all mentally ill. As long as you have it. He doesn't use that phrase, but he would have liked it, I think. Because attachment is our worst mental illness. Ego grasping is the one that's even worse than that. They're all mental illnesses in their nature, and Buddha means that seriously. We just think he's like joking to say they're mental illnesses. We only think when a person's extremely mentally ill. But he says we're all mentally ill. It's just a question of degree. Having any attachment, any ego grasping, any jealousy, any depression, we are mentally ill. So Buddha's more radical in what he asserts is mental illness, and is more radical in his assertion of how we can be free of it. Do you understand? So, again, do the analysis. Can we establish there is a thing called depression? We need to give it a label, we need to give it a definition, and then we analyse what is depression. Just like what is holding a cup, what is I am watching my breath. Of course it doesn't exist inherently, but it does exist conventionally. And that's pretty much the same discussion.
what I would think is like when you have a diagnosis, it's like something is constant, like
You told me, I don't want to talk, okay, I want to purposely not talk in Western psychological terms.
exactly. So,
I want to talk as a Buddhist, please. So talk as a Buddhist. What is depression for you? What do you think depression is?
It's a lot of pieces. It's a lot of pieces
No,
of
please tell me what depression is, so we can all be on the same page and discuss this.
sadness, lack of motivation.
Okay, they're the symptoms, I'd say.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what depression is in Buddha's view, shall I?
Yeah.
In the list of delusions in the Buddhist model, they don't have a word depression. But I'll tell you what it is, and this is very interesting, if we use Buddhist analysis. Okay. We have the fundamental delusion that runs us from day to day, and this is all sentient beings, it's called attachment, which is this bottomless pit of craving to get what I want every millisecond. Now we don't talk like this in the West, do we? So we have to use Buddha's view here. That's the main disease running us every second. Can you hear this? Now, check what happens when that attachment doesn't get what it wants. One example, so that's called aversion.
Yeah.
So the two main delusions that we run between 1 billion times a day, all sentient beings, is craving to get what I want, and then as soon as you don't get it, could be the red light, it could be my husband leaving me for the younger version, it could be dropping something on the floor. Do you understand? Then that instant, when attachments stop like this, it becomes aversion. Variations. Now, a typical way that aversion will ripen, manifest in a person like me is called anger. I'd shout, I'd kick, I'd scream, I'd curse. That's typical anger, isn't it? You see a person shouting and yelling. And that is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Now, a person called depressed is a person who also doesn't get what they want, but we don't notice this 90% of the time. It can be tiny baby things building up, and what that manifests as is it goes in, and it's feeling kind of hopeless and grey and depressing and despair, and it's inert, and it goes in, and that's what depression is. It's internalized aversion, and it builds up as an energy in the body, just like anger does. Anger is easy to see. Aversion, depression, internalized aversion is much harder to see because the symptoms aren't so violent. And then eventually our trouble is because we don't notice moment by moment. You know, when you just drop something, you just, oh God, you know, you don't notice that it's the beginning of depression if you're that kind of person. But if you drop something all the time and then the car accident happens and the hubby leaves you, then you can't get out of bed one morning because it's all built up over years and you only finally notice it. But it's too late. If we notice our mind every second, and this is the Buddhist view, if we caught the attachment every second wanting something, and the second doesn't get it, we fix it, and we adjust it and we accept it, you would never get depressed. You would never get angry. This is the Buddhist view of the way of saying it.
Say it again.
Pardon?
Say it again.
Oh, Jimmy, you take your notes, you wouldn't have to. Don't be so rude. This is cooking class, Nadia.
No.
Excuse me, Nadia.
No, but
I notice you're not doing any notes. You're putting the onus on me.
I am doing.
Oh, good.
Your last words.
I don't remember what I said now.
Yeah, you don't even remember them.
Don't blame me. You should have heard them. Nadia, how dare you?
No, but when you said that
Well, ask her. She
you
heard
should
me.
never be depressed. You should never
That's
be
what I'm
angry.
saying. You wouldn't be.
If you look at your mind all the time,
That's what I'm
and
saying,
accept
Nadia. This is
what is
precisely the point. What I'm trying to say is this, Nadia.
Yeah.
That every second, if we understand that attachment is always there, we don't talk like this in the West. We don't use this phrase. Do you understand what I'm saying? We just think I'm a normal person walking through life, doing my dishes and going here and saying hello to the hubby and going to work and stopping at the red lights. But it's building up all the time because we're getting irritated. Probably 10,000 times a day. Attachment will get it what it wants, but then suddenly it won't. The red light will come. You get annoyed. Then you drop something. You get annoyed. Then hubby is mean to you, and you get more annoyed, and it builds up. We don't notice it. We don't deal with it at that time. It builds up until eventually it breaks. Do you understand? So literally, this is the Buddha's point, sweetheart. The more we have practice more, okay. Before we even begin to control our mind, we have to go to junior school and we have to control our body and speech. This is already incredible practice. You know, where Buddha talks about don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, don't have sexual misconduct, don't drink too much alcohol. Control your body and speech and don't harm sentient beings. Already you're controlling your mind, but you're at least not harming others. And you maybe then, of course, you'll stop putting 6 pieces of cake in the mouth because you're controlling your body. That's called discipline. That's called do what your grandma says, behave nicely, you know. That's already a profound practice. Already it's the body and speech you're controlling, but you're exercising your mind because your decision is, I won't eat too much, I won't jump on the wrong partner, I won't gossip too much, you understand? So already you're calming your mind down. Now you can go to high school and you get some concentration and you learn Buddha's model of the mind and you be your own therapist every single day. You do your purification practice, they help underneath, but every day is this work of being your own therapist, catching. I mean, 1 million times a day, it's very hard for us. We only notice what's happening in here when it's big. When it's shouting, you know. And that's where the more awareness we have, the more we hear all the voices, small baby ones, and we deal with them right there. Because attachment is a junkie that wants only the nice things, and it won't get the nice things all the time. But it's only when it really doesn't get the really nice things that we notice it. But if you catch it and then you adjust your thoughts, this is what being your own therapist means. You're catching your mind, and you see that irritation arise. Oh, shut up, Robina. It's okay, darling. It's fine. You talk to yourself all the time. You're being your own therapist. So by the end of the day, you've dealt with the problems when they've arisen. You won't ever get depressed and angry and jealous. This is literally true. And then, of course, then you realise emptiness. You've cut the whole thing properly. And you get braver and braver at dealing with the problems. And the bigger the problem, the more you're able to deal with it. Whereas now, when the big problems come, people literally lose their minds. They go mad. Because no one's ever dealt with anything. We just punch and kick and shout and up and down like yo-yos. We don't notice attachment. Over-exaggerating. You know, one day you wake up and you feel really good. And you know, suddenly you don't feel very busy, isn't it? You feel like you can handle everything. And next day, the same jobs, but you're completely having a panic attack. Isn't it true? That's the way attachment works. One day, things look okay. Next day, they look bad. It's the same day, the same jobs. That's how the mind is so unstable. Up and down like yo-yos. Panic attack one day, relax the next day. But what happens is the day you feel good, attachment's over-exaggerating and think everything's fine. But you're exaggerating. And then the next day, it under-exaggerates. So we never can find the middle, you know. We're always up and down, like berserk. This is called samsara. This is called delusions. This is the Buddhist view, way of saying, you know. Are we communicating?